Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is David and today we are going to continue with our FPL Scout Report series where we have a look at some of the new faces in the Premier League, some of the players who've changed one club for another, and some of the new men coming in at the helm as manager of Premier League teams. And today we are going to be talking about Mateo Kovacic, who has made a move from Chelsea to Man City ahead of the new campaign, already being touted as the replacement for Ilkay Gundogan, who historically has been a very exciting asset for fantasy managers, especially in the last couple of years. And so the question that might be on some managers' lips is, can Kovacic come in, be that new Gundogan, be a budget route into the Man City attack, and be a good way of balancing an FPL team with some decent cheap options to enable more premiums? And so that is where we are going to focus today, very much with those comparisons with Gundogan, where he's going to fit in at Man City and what that means for FPL. So let's jump right into it then. Let's have a look specifically at that comparison between Kovacic and Gundogan. And we're going to start with a look at some heat maps from the most recent season, which are, of course, taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. If you haven't already signed up for the new campaign, head to fantasyfootballscout.co.uk, have a look at members benefits on the top menu, and pick the package that's right for you. Absolutely sure that it will help you win at FPL, beat your mates, and finish top of your mini leagues. But yes, these heat maps then, two of the fantastic things you can do in the members area is looking at an individual player's heat map, but also comparing them as well. And that's what we've got on the screen right now. We've got Kovacic on the left and we've got Gundogan on the right. Now, even though they play in different systems at their respective clubs, these two players in the season just finished, they are very much both left-sided central midfield players. So let's have a look at how they compare. So Kovacic on the left then, we've got a massive bubble in what you would describe as the left-hand number 8 section of the midfield. There's also quite a healthy chunk of touches on the other side of the halfway line, stretching back into the defensive third as well. Now, when you look to the Gundogan heat map, it is actually a very different story. So we've still got a massive chunk of touches on the left-hand side of midfield. There's also quite a massive chunk on the middle and stretching out just tentatively onto the right-hand side. There is also some touches in his own half, but it's considerably less for Gundogan. And where it looks like he's missing some red that Kovacic has in the defensive third, he's really got the equivalent of that in the penalty box at the other end. And so already we can see that Gundogan very much is a much more advanced type of player for City than Kovacic has been for Chelsea. Now, there are a couple of caveats that come with that. Firstly, it's Man City. And so their touches of the ball historically and typically are sort of 10, 15 yards further up the pitch than everybody else, because they make sure that they reduce the size of the pitch to pretty much just the opposition's half, and you've got your centre-backs kind of standing in the centre circle making the build-up. And so, just by the law of averages, you would expect that Gundogan would have fewer touches in the defensive third and more touches in the penalty box anyway. As for Chelsea, Kovacic largely been playing on the left-hand side of a 4-3-3 as a more traditional number 8, so he is more likely to be involved in more box-to-box action than a Man City player in the same role. And of course, the thing about City, especially this season, they've moved to that 3-2-4-1 scenario. So by having Stones and Rodri kind of effectively like two number 6s, it stops the two number 8s having to be so box to box. You know, box to box for them is effectively coming from the halfway line to go into the box rather than going from box to box. And so if Kovacic was to come in and slot into a Gundogan role, could he be able to post a heat map a bit more similar to that one next season? Well, only time will tell on that one. A couple of things that we have sort of made note of since he signed for Man City is very much how he's talking about his best position and how Man City are talking about his best position. So Kovacic himself was saying, I feel on the left-hand side of midfield is probably my best position, but in the end it's always the manager who decides where you play, and I think I'm quite flexible. But for sure, he will tell me what he wants from me, and this is what I want to learn and to improve my skills to be a better player. That is typically non-committal from a new player when they sign for a new club. It's kind of the stuff they usually say. Just with we're getting left side of central midfield. That's the little nugget we've got there. Now, there's slight hints from the director of football at Man City that we could see him maybe playing in a slightly deeper role. Could he play as a number 6 alongside Rodri? John Stones has done very well there this season, but some strength and depth alongside Rodri would be quite useful. Or could he even be cover for Rodri as well? That's possible. So, yeah, from the director of football, Mateo is an excellent footballer, something I personally happen to agree with as well. I do like watching him. He can play as a 6 or an 8. He has plenty of experience at top-level clubs, and he understands the Premier League. It was a very simple decision to bring him to City because he has the tactical and technical qualities we are looking for in a midfielder. And so, yeah, it's very hard to say exactly where he's going to slot in because he does have that versatility, and you could argue that already that's probably something that might count against him for FPL purposes. You would have to say. Now, what can also count against people for FPL purposes is being at Man City and therefore not necessarily guaranteed to start every week. And so one of the things that we also have to assess when anyone signs for Man City is, are they the sort of player who we think can be rotation-proof? Now, when Haaland came in last summer, we could very much see that it was very unlikely that he was going to get rotated too often. De Bruyne is another one who you'd expect to be playing quite regularly. Now, when you are a central midfielder at Man City, that is a dangerous place to be if you're anticipating a season where you want to start 38 times, because it just isn't going to happen. That is very much the area where Guardiola does like to make his changes. And so, he has two types of teams he likes to play. He likes to have a control-based team and he likes to have an attacking team, depending on whether or not he's playing a big team who he expects to need to control, like an Arsenal or a Liverpool or something, versus a bottom of the table team that he just needs to run through. And so we've got a decent quote here from Pep from earlier on this season when he was discussing this particular idea of just what he does with his central midfielders depending on the team. So when I want runners in the attacking midfielders, I will put Phil Foden or Ilkay Gundogan in the team. They are better than Kevin De Bruyne when he is closer to the ball. When I want more control, I will play Bernardo Silva. Sometimes for the way the opponent defends, the form, and many things, I need a specific player to do this or that. That is where they play. Now, the question is, where do we see Kovacic fitting into that cycle through of midfielders, depending on what they're best at, depending on who the team is the Man City are playing? And you have to say that he does feel like a player, Kovacic, who is more like a Bernardo Silva than a Foden, or how we've seen Gundogan utilised at Man City. We know that he is someone who is very good at dribbling, ball retention, close control, resisting presses as well. And we've got a really fascinating graphic on the screen from the Devil's DNA on Twitter that really shows that in a really good visual way. And so it's a graph. We've got two axes. We've got carries per 60 touches on one axis, and then on the other one, it's number of ball control losses per 60 touches. And the higher up you are, the fewer you've got, because obviously that's better. And so in terms of his carries per 60 touches, it's around 41. And then in terms of ball losses per 60 touches for Kovacic, it's around 2. And so that puts him, and I appreciate it's really small on the screen right now, very much in the top right-hand corner, where he's able to balance those two stats very well. He's up there with Rodri, and he's up there with Enzo Fernandez also at Chelsea as well. And so he's very, very good at resisting the press, carrying the ball through areas where he is going to have to operate in tight spaces. And so that very much is the sort of thing that Guardiola is going to want when he is trying to control games against these bigger, aggressive teams like Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, wriggling out of tight spaces, bypassing the press, setting City on attacks. And so then that's very much what Bernardo does as well. And unfortunately, what we've seen less of from Kovacic is, end product in the opposition box. We've seen Gundogan do that quite well of late, in the last 2 or 3 seasons especially. But unfortunately, and this is probably not news to many of you, at Chelsea, we haven't seen too much attacking return for him. So just 4 goals and 13 assists for him in 5 years at Chelsea. So that's averaging at just 3.4 attacking returns a season. You would expect that maybe that would improve at City because, Gundogan actually himself, he wasn't really much of a goal machine when he came to City. In fact, his final year at Dortmund, he had just 1 goal and 3 assists in that time. And then even after he arrived at City, he wasn't immediately, an FPL asset that we were all considering. It was 2020-21 campaign when he really flourished into that. He was really a false 9 when Jesus wasn't playing. It was that season when they didn't really have a centre forward because Jesus got a bit of an injury, and then he was sort of in and out of the team in terms of rotation. That was when Gundogan was at his best. But even with Haaland in the team, as a very aggressive number 8 in recent seasons. That's a transformation that happened for Gundogan, so maybe that could happen with Kovacic. It's hard to say in many ways, but the numbers on the screen aren't necessarily all that exciting. I mean, when we consider that we've got we've got a cumulative XG delta across these campaigns of minus 3.44, and so he scored just 4 goals from an XG of 7.44 across 5 years, which is a long time, really. So it's a good data size for us to say he's not really that much of a goal threat. And then also the underperformers as well. It's not just about the fact that the XG is very low. He historically isn't a very good finisher, because you also look at his shot to goal conversion rate, 4.8% in the 2019-20 season. Then in the 2021-22 season, 9.1%. The season just finished, 4.3%. So yeah. He's miles off being able to make a convincing case that he can be a new Gundogan, because the rare occasions when he's had shots, he hasn't particularly had much ruthlessness with them. With assists as well, again, it's even harder to gauge this, because his role at Chelsea has been more of a box-to-box transitioner than being relied upon to be that sort of creative spark. There's no way that he's ever been asked by anybody to be like a Kevin De Bruyne, and of course he's not going to have that specific role at City because Kevin De Bruyne is still going to be there. So he is very good at making sort of successful forward passes, and so he actually made more successful forward passes than any of his new teammates, bar De Bruyne, in the season that's just finished. But that's probably going to see him making the assist for the assister, which, by the way, is largely how we've described Bernardo Silva over many, many years. So it kind of seems like that is what we can expect based on what we've seen so far. In terms of the numbers on his creativity, he'd had no more than 5 assists in any of his previous seasons at Chelsea. No more than 27 key passes in any of those campaigns. He did that twice in 2019-20 and 21-22. And then in terms of big chances created, the best he could manage was 8, and that was in the 21-22 season as well. Now, as we've said, these numbers don't look great, but then again, they didn't look great for Gundogan when he was at Dortmund, and the role that Kovacic has been playing at Chelsea is possibly different to what he could play at City. Now, if he comes into City and he plays alongside Rodri, then it's going to be the same role, and it probably isn't going to make him that much of a good FPL asset. However, if Guardiola is happy to persist with Rodri and Stones, and I think we can all see that was a very successful combination. They just won the treble with that combination, and they've lost Gundogan and they need a replacement there. And you can't see Rodri or Stones going into the Gundogan slot, so maybe he puts Kovacic there. We could see potentially a transformation in the heat map, because his touches, just because he's playing for Man City, are naturally going to gravitate closer to the goal, for example. And also the same with just some of these attacking numbers. When you join a team as good as Man City and you're around these fantastic players, you are going to be able to boost your attacking output. Already mentioned Rodri, I think it was 2 goals, 6 assists this season, which for a midfielder who is fairly cheap in a decent team and you're fairly confident with start every game, that's Rodri, I mean, isn't too bad. The question is, can Kovacic get to that situation? Well, it's hard to say. What we've got on the screen now is 2 predicted lineups, really, and because you have to with City, don't you? You can't just have one predicted lineup, because they play so many different situations for different games. And so I should just clarify that a lot of this information has come from a Scout Report article on fantasyfootballscout.co.uk written by the one and the only Neil Rigg, who of course is the team news king in terms of predicting lineups every week. And so he spends so much of his spare time just going over every Man City lineup and working out why it was picked, what reasons it was picked for, helping Neil work out exactly what type of team Pep likes to go for this game, for that game. And that's helped him come up with some estimated lineups depending on what type of game Man City are going into. And so we're on the left-hand side, we've got a control-based 11, and on the right-hand side, we've got more of an attacking team. And these 2 lineups are based around the team as they are right now, not including any future signings, of course, or anyone who might leave the club. And so, yeah, Neil's opinion very much is that Kovacic, to begin with, is probably going to get used in the control-based 11 because that's closer to what he's used to. And if Guardiola does want to transition him into something more akin to the Gundogan that we have known of late, that's going to take some time. And so there's definitely options that Guardiola can go with to avoid having to put Kovacic into that role when he's not ready for it. So left-hand side, control-based 11, Ederson, Ake, Diaz, Akanji, with Stones and Rodri anchoring midfield. Then De Bruyne and Kovacic as the two number 8s. Bernardo Silva and Grealish on the wings. And then Haaland up front. And then for the attacking one, he would be able to, Guardiola would be able to keep the same back 6. Ederson, Ake, Diaz, Akanji, Rodri, and Stones. Then he could play Alvarez and Foden as the two number 8s, being able to make those runs into the box. And then Grealish and Mahrez as the wingers, because Mahrez typically gets used more when he's trying to attack rather than control things. And then Haaland up front, because he's obviously a mainstay. So that would seem like the most likely scenario for what Kovacic's role would be coming into Man City. And so what does that mean for FPL then? Well, unfortunately, it probably means at the start of the season, as you probably all expect, he's not really someone we're going to be looking at. Some of it might depend on price, you guess. He's been a 5 million midfielder at the start of the last 2 seasons, but really he's probably going to go up to 5.5 for the new campaign, just purely on the fact that he's going to be a Man City player now. Now, that is going to, if he is in that bracket, then that could mean that later on in the campaign, if he does manage to transition into a Gundogan, which at the moment seems unlikely, then he is going to offer decent value. But for now, his best FPL impact is probably going to be on everybody else. Because you probably sat there wondering, David, why have you wasted roughly 20 minutes of my life talking about whether or not Mateo Kovacic is going to be a decent FPL asset for the new season? And that's a very good question to ask. And my answer to that is probably because what he's going to do is he's going to make Man City even better in midfield, is my personal opinion. Kovacic is someone who, just completely aside from FPL, I've absolutely loved watching for the last couple of years, and especially in the last 2 or 3 years at Chelsea when it hasn't gone completely to plan. He's someone I always like just keeping an eye on anyway, because he has to do a lot of hard work in that midfield, and just the way that he can help transition the team, just the way that he's able to carry the ball through difficult situations and be very press resistant is quite nice to watch for football purists. And I do think that that's going to improve Man City in midfield, especially in those games where they're looking for control. Could it mean that in the games when they are playing the bigger opposition, that additional level of control in midfield might make Haaland even more attractive than he was before? The same with Grealish as well. In the attacking games, where we expect him not to be as involved, maybe it won't make that much difference for now. But my general view here is that Kovacic, not really going to be an FPL asset this season, but he could make your Man City players that little bit more exciting. Perhaps if you've torn between a Man City player and Salah for a captaincy, might push you more towards the City player. If you're wondering about whether or not you should double up on the City attack, I think Kovacic being around is just going to make this team even more exciting, especially in those games against the bigger teams. So that's everything from me on Kovacic for now. If you've enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification as well. At this particular time of the season, when there's no deadlines or anything, now is a good time to hit that bell notification, because that's when you know there's more content to check out, because your mind is not so guided by those deadlines. We've got plenty of other content as well. We've done tons of scout reports across the summer, looking at those new players, those transfers from one club to another, and those new managers as well. The fixtures, of course, have been out for a little while as well, so if you need some analysis on those, then don't forget to go check out videos and podcasts on best fixtures, when to wildcard, the rotations for defensive players, captaincy, things like that. There's all sorts of stuff there waiting for you to prepare for the new campaign. So with that, I'll leave you fine folks to enjoy the rest of your summer, and I will see you next time.